Good evening, Hashluchos and distinguished guests. In looking at the theme of the convention, a quote from the Hayom Yom, the Rebbe brings a quote from his father-in-law, the Friedrich Rebbe, that the Jewish women should be in the forefront. It seems to me that back then, when the Hayom Yom was printed in the early 40s, quoting a statement from the Friedrich Rebbe from even earlier years, from the 30s perhaps, at that time, that Pisgum was probably a wish and a prayer. Today we can proudly say that it has become a reality. That you, Shluchos, and what you represent are today in the forefront of Jewish life all over the world. You are envied. Other Jewish organizations try to emulate you, but they don't come close. You are second to none. God bless you. And we see the fulfillment of the Rebbe's wish that today, in fact, you, Shluchis, you women, are in the forefront of Jewish life in the entire world today. This Kinus Hashluchos is scheduled every year during the closest weekend to Chof Shvat. This Chof Shvat, Shabbos, marks the 25th yahrzeit of the Rebbetzin Chayamushka. The Rebbetzin is a most important woman in our lives and in the lives of the entire Jewish nation. Because when you think of it, and you don't have to think too deeply, had it not been for the Rebbetzin Chas v'Sholom, then we would not have had the Rebbe Chas v'Sholom. As the Rebbe said in the Fabringen in Tovshin Yudalad, on the 25th anniversary of the wedding, that it was the day that tied us up together. The Rebbe with us and us with the Rebbe. So all that we are and all that we hope to be, we really owe to her. It was a Tuesday night, 25 years ago. I was home eating dinner with my wife. I got a call from the Rebbe's house in President Street that the Rebbetzin wasn't feeling well. There were some doctors in the house, and she had to be taken to the hospital. They asked that I rush as quickly as I could because the Rebbetzin wanted that I should go along with her. I rushed as fast as I could. There were two doctors that I never met before, never saw again. They left the house before us to rush to the hospital to prepare to receive the Rebbetzin when she got there. The Rebbetzin walked out of the back door of 1304 President Street, walked down the steps, walked slowly to the car, got into the car. Dr. Feldman joined her and another two people in the car, and we drove to the hospital. I've told this before, I can say it again, that on the way up, in the Rebbetzin talking and discussion in the car, you could not know that anything was going wrong. She spoke with Dr. Feldman. Her daughter became a Gala, was preparing for the wedding. She wanted to know all about her preparations for the wedding, etc., like there was nothing else to talk about. We got to the hospital. It was New York Hospital, the Cornell Hospital on York Avenue. The Rebbetzin went upstairs, and I was thinking of something strange that happened on the way to the hospital. While we were in the backyard, just before we left, the car was facing the street, and the Rebbe walked over to the car and was waving to the Rebbetzin goodbye. And I opened the driver's window and I said to the Rebbe, "Ich bete a broche, am soll bald kennen kommen heim Gesundheit." And the Rebbe looked at me, he heard what I said, and he said to me two words that I didn't understand then, and I didn't understand for some 25 years. He said, "Gam atem." You too. What connection did that have with the Bakash's Barucha? I don't know. And I didn't know. A little over 2 months ago, I lost my wife, Dvorah, and it occurred to us, she passed away just one building away from the Hashluchos of the Rebbetzin, Chaimushka. And retrospectively, it seemed to me and my children, the family, that the Rebbe was returning to me the Bakash's Barucha from me to him on behalf of his wife. On Chav Beis Shvat, the Rebbe really suffered very deep and inconsolable grief. It was visible especially to those who were close to him. When the Rebbe was sitting Shiva, he was visited by many people, of course. There was one prominent Rav, an author of many books, who said something to the Rebbe that I felt was inappropriate, but it's printed in the Menachem Tzion. He said to the Rebbe that we know in Masechta Yuma, the Gemara that talks about Yom Kippur, that the Kohen Gadol had to go into the courtship only once a year. It was on Yom Kippur, and there was a tefillah that he had to say. He had to ask for forgiveness for his home, for his house, for himself and for his home. He had to be married, he had to have a wife, otherwise the prayer could not be recited, it would not validate his permission to enter the courtship. And the Gemara says, what if she passes away in the preparation for Yom Kippur? So the Mishnah says that they had to prepare another wife for him, that if something should happen, that she would not be alive in that week of Achana. On Yom Kippur, he would have to marry another woman. And that transformation would also have to carry with it, he should be besimcha. Because Avodas Hashem is besimcha. A Kohen that was in mourning or not besimcha could not truly fulfill his role in representing the Jewish people in Yom Kippurim. The Rebbe listened very politely to this Rav's dissertation, but he didn't agree with him. He said, I'm not going to go into a polemic with you in this issue, but I want to draw your attention to a Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin, where the Gemara says, Lakel yesh tmura. For everything there is a substitute. Chutz me'eshis ne'urim. Except the wife and the love of your youth. That is irreplaceable. To say that the Rebbe's heart was broken would be putting it very mildly. But just as he taught us in his recurrent theme of Chayit and Libe, for us all to take heart, so did the Rebbe himself, and very remarkably. But at the same time, I can tell you, this was during the year of Avelis. It was September of 1988, Tovshin Memches, shortly before Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe asked me to come into his room. At that time, he was living in President Street in the home, and asked me to do something. And in the middle of talking, the Rebbe says, Es fehlt bei mir in der Inyan von Simcha. He's lacking Simcha. So the Rebbe did not hide the fact of the enormous impact that the stalkers of the Rebbetzin, his Eishes and Urim, had on him. I want to divert for a moment about something personal, some recollection. When I was a youngster, I was a bocher, 23 years old. I went into Yechidus to the Rebbe, and in the middle of the Yechidus, he says to me that he's going to put my name on the list of those who should have shidduchim. As far as I was concerned, it was completely unsolicited. I didn't ask the Rebbe anything about a shidduch. And I heard what the Rebbe said, and we left it at that. A few months later, I was in Yechidus again with the Rebbe about something special. Had nothing to do with me personally. And in the course of the time from the previous Yechidus, I had 4 or 5 names had been given to me from my parents and from others about proposals for shidduchim, very fine people, my family. I knew the families, I didn't know the girls. And I decided that I would list the names with the Rebbe and ask him for guidance what I should do. It's exactly what I did. And I gave the Rebbe the list, and he looked at it, and he says to me, "Was mit der Kazinitz Mädel?" Kazinitz, we say Kazinitz, the Rebbe said Kazinitz. He was the Friedrich Rebbe's sheikhet. He was a very fine man. I admired him for many, many reasons, which I will not go into now, on a completely different level and for different reasons. And he said, sorry, I was a little puzzled, I don't know why, but he says, "Doch Meishe's Schwester." My wife's brother, Meishe, was a contemporary of mine. We were chaverim in yeshiva, chavrus in many, many inyanim of limud, chassidus and nigla. And she didn't have any, she had one brother, they were one son and one daughter in the Kazinitz family, a ben Yochad and a bas Yechida. So I asked the Rebbe for guidance, and I got it. I saw her, I met her for the first time, it was at Rish Chedesh Sivan. I had come back from the Ehel with Erev Rish Chedesh with the Rebbe, and I ran to the dormitory, and I got ready to go to meet Meishe's Schwester. They lived in Bronzeville at that time. That was the Jewish neighborhood, much more than Crown Heights in those years. Crown Heights was too expensive, too upscale for most of the Chabad community. And I went to the house. I met her. I was sat in the house with the parents. It's not the way you do it today anymore, I think. I spent about 2 hours there. And as I said at the Shalom, I was very impressed. And our parents, both sets of parents, decided we should write Tanoim. In those days, it wasn't a Chaim or a Vort. It was really a Kishuri Tanoim. In fact, the Rebbe sent us a letter before the Tanoim, a Mazel Tov to the Chassan and Kala for the Kishuri Tanoim. And at the Tanoim, you actually wrote a shtar, you had the Kabbalah's Kinyan, you had witnesses, it was a signed document. It was set for the 15th of Tammuz. It was about 6 weeks after I met her. It was a very short courtship. And the night before the date of the Tanoim, Mitzvah Shabbos, 15th of Tammuz was a Sunday. Mitzvah Shabbos, the Rebbe announced that he was going to visit Gan Yisrael the next day. So Sunday came, and I was the Rebbe's designated driver, even as a bocher for many years. And we left Crown Heights at about 12:30. There wasn't any quick way. The 17 didn't exist. The roads were bad. And by the time we got to Gan Yisrael, it took about 4 hours, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The Rebbe visited the grounds and the buildings and the bunks thoroughly, and then they washed for a Suda, and then they benched, and the Rebbe gave kosher bracha to all the campers and the staff, and gave them mementos. I think it was a mincha maitiv with a special stamp on it. And we left Gan Yisrael, and then the decision was to stop into Camp Amunah, the girls' camp, which we did. And it was getting late. And we got back to 770 at 11:30 at night. The Rebbe davened maitiv, and then I took the Rebbe home. I drove up the driveway, and the Rebbe looks at me with a smile before he gets out of the car, and he says, Das wird eingedacht schreiben Träum, nein? And I just smiled back. I knew that he knew. He sent us a Michtav Bracha. And he started showering me with brachas for myself and my Gala. I wouldn't have changed a thing for anything. Her brother Mesha was waiting at the end of the driveway in President Street with a car to take me to the Tanoim in Bronzeville, to my in-laws' house. We came to the house. It was well after 12:30. Everybody was gone. Her grandparents came from Philadelphia. Her aunts, uncles, cousins left for home, other destinations. All that was left was her parents, my parents, and some relatives, and Dvorah, of course. She was all smiles, and she was very proud that her chassan spent the day in service of the Rebbe. I was told after I returned that many of her relatives counseled her during the day when the chassan didn't show up that maybe she should reconsider the whole deal while she had a chance to before the Tanoim. I also remember on Chof Elul, the date of our marriage, the Rebbe was our Masad Kedushin. It was a very rainy day, without let-up, and the chuppah was, we waited, it was in the backyard of 770, and it was raining, and nobody wanted the Rebbe to get wet, and we waited as long as we could until the Rebbe himself realized that it was getting late, and the rain let up somewhat, but it did continue raining. And the Rebbe notified us that as far as he's concerned, there shouldn't be any further delay. So we entered the chuppah. I was standing next to my Gala in the Mechotonim. And the Rebbe came out, stood under the chuppah. And I'll never forget the rain dripping from the middle of the chuppah onto the Rebbe's hat, from his hat onto his siddur. And he didn't move an inch. And during the chuppah, we were all soaked with Gishmei Bracha. From that day on, my life with Dvorah together for over 55 years was an open book. It was like living in a glass house. Now, as you know, on Shmini Atzeres, Tovshin Lamed Ches, I can't stop my nose, I'm sorry. The Rebbe suffered a very acute heart attack in the middle of Hakofis. You all know that. And you may all know as well that we didn't know at first that it was a heart attack. There were no cardiologists in 770. And after the Rebbe finished the Hakofis in Aleinu and the Kadeshim, he went up to his room. And the doctors told him to make Kiddush. He said, it's Shmini Atzeres, I have to make Kiddush in the Sukkah. The Rebbe went to the Sukkah. Within moments, the Rebbetzin arrived from President Street. She wanted to know what was going on. The Rebbe made Kiddush for her, etc. Doctors came, doctors left. Between the half a dozen doctors that came, there were 4 cardiologists, specialists in the field, who said that the Rebbe needed to go to the hospital. It's an emergency, very acute. And the Rebbe said he's not going to the hospital. He's going to stay in his room. And he can be treated in his room just as well. And he's b'shumei for not going to the hospital. I'll cut through all the details. That was about 12 o'clock at night that the last doctor left, and there was no doctors left to care for the Rebbe in his room. And there were certain machines hooked up to see about the heartbeat and all that. And about 5:30 in the morning, the fibrillation started. The heartbeat became irregular, which could be very, very dangerous. And the doctors decided to sedate the Rebbe and take him to the hospital against his wishes. And suddenly the Rebbetzin came walking down from the second floor in 770 and got in a tachten. And she said, "What's going on?" And they told her what's going on. She said, "You mean you want to sedate my husband?" They said, "Yes. We've seen an alternative because we don't know what to do. It's the Rebbe and it's dangerous." And she said, and I'll never forget it, she said to them, "In all my years that I know my husband, never for a moment or a second was he not in total control of himself. And I can't allow you to do it." She was one against the world. And those who knew the Rebbetzin, she was a very delicate, petite, beautiful lady. And she said it so cool, calm, and collected when she knew that her husband was, according to the doctors, in a very critical condition. But she knew him. And she refused to let him go, and they didn't go. And then I went into the America's office on the other side of the hall, those who know the configuration of 770, and I heard her following me into the office, and she says to me, "Rabbi Krinsky, ich kennt doch sehr viel Menschen, ich kennt nicht gefunden einen Doktor für meinen Mann." And as soon as she said that, I had a lightning bolt in my mind. I remembered that it was a Dr. Weiss, whom you all know by now, most of you at least, Dr. Ira Weiss. He was a cardiologist. I knew of him. He lived in Chicago. No doctor in New York or any place close wanted to deal with the Rebbe on his terms. When I called him and told him the situation, he said, "Good, if the Rebbe doesn't want to go, don't you dare take him against his will. It can be more damaging than anything else. I'll get the first plane. In the meantime, do this and do that." Within a few hours, he came with a colleague of his. He stood by the Rebbe's side for a couple of weeks. He lost his practice with his partners, but he did better than that on his own. And he nursed the Rebbe back to health. I mean, there's so much written about this. I'm not sure if I'm telling you something new. What I want to say is that when we visit once to the Rebbetzin asked Dr. Weiss, "You spend so much time taking care of my husband. Who takes care of you when you come to New York?" He says, Mrs. Dvorah Krinsky. And she says to him, "If that's the case, you're in good hands." But the Rebbe's entire life was dedicated to us, to Klal Yisrael, and beyond, in many instances. He taught us many, many things. He comforted us in our grief. He comforted the Jewish people in their grief. The Rebbe was the singular person who comforted the entire Jewish people after the Holocaust, who built Lubavitch into the masterpiece, magnificent masterpiece that it is. He created the institution of shluchim, that is, as I said before, the envy of every Jewish organization. He taught us how to live. He taught us what to do, what not to do. He taught us how to rejoice. He taught us how to mourn. The same Dr. Weiss came in Chov Shvat after the funeral. When the Rebbe heard that he was there, he said he would like to see him upstairs on the second floor in the Rebbe's study in the house, under one condition, that he won't come up as a doctor for a physical examination, as he was prone to do, in which he did very, very well. He can come in as a private person. And he went up, spent some time with the Rebbe closeted in his study, and he came down and he said, the irony, "I came to be Menachem Avu the Rebbe, and the Rebbe comforted me." The Rebbe's v'hachayit in alibe, was taken seriously, and he taught to us how we should deal with hachayit and alibe. All I can say in terms of hachayit and alibe, what I would like to say to you, Hashluchos. There's nothing like shalom bayis. The Medrash says in Vayikra, I'll read you the exact lashon in its original form. Tonad ve Rabbi Shmuel, Gadol HaSholom, the greatest thing is peace. Sheshem HaGodol, the holy name of Hashem, Shenichtav b'kedusha, that is written with holiness. Omar Kodesh Baruch Hu, God Himself said, Yimocha Ahamayim. You can erase it in the water. B'shvil lahatel shalom bein ish le'ishtei, to bring peace between man and wife. I'm not going to say anything new, but I understand in the course of time that the union of shalom bayis in some personal lives and constituents is problematic. That has to be done away with. There has to be perfect harmony at home. It's not only for yourself and your husbands, but for your children and your constituents. The Rebbe wrote a woman, a shlucha, about the ikir of the bayis. I'm not going to look for the precise language, but he said the bayis is the ikir bayis, to take care of the house, to be mechanech the children, b'chinuch al taras hakedesh. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that tonight is the Siyam HaRambam, the 31st Mahzor comes to an end tomorrow, and the day after we start this 32nd Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis is Lev. We all know Perek Lev and Tanya, it's in Yifan Ahavas Yisrael. When the Rebbe came back from the Levaya on Chav Bei Shvat, after davening Mincha, there was a short sicha from the Rebbe where he brought the Rambam that says that Nichem Avelim is an offshoot of Ahavas Yisrael. When the Rebbe made the takona of Limud HaRambam, 3 prokim l'yom, 3 chapters a day, or 1 chapter of Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Rebbe said that that applies to women as well. He would like it to apply to women as well, and preferably that 1 mitzvah a day that women should learn should be in consonance with the 3 prokim of the highest level of the Limud HaRambam. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, but the Isim being literally tonight, tomorrow, I think it's important for all of you to know and remind you about it. And those who do it, Tovil and Baruch, and those who don't do it, see what you can do about it. I just want to tell you something in praise of myself. Yeah, there was something after the year of Avelis. After the year of Avelis. And I say this because some people think that the Rebbe had us as children, but all those wonderful things that we had from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe had hopefully from us. But when you really think about it, the Rebbe was all alone after Chav Bei Shvat. There wasn't a soul, there were no parents, no brothers, no sisters, no children. You can't be lonelier than that. And after he lost the Rebbetzin, he was literally alone. And you can't imagine the change that it made in his life. He may not have seen it. He wouldn't want anybody to know about it. But there's one time, this was after the year of Avelis, when it should be all over, after Yud Beis Chedesh. And the Rebbe asked me to do something for him that was a little complex because it involved other people. And he asked me to try to see what I could do about it. When I let him know that everything worked out okay, I wrote it in a memorandum and it settled to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe thanked me for bringing him simcha. And he wrote, Messiah l'kayim hatzivoi l'harbeis besimcha. This was Chedesh Oder, Mabem besimcha. Halavai, in English, others should do the same. I want to thank the Vada of the Kinus of the Hashluchos, a large body of women who work so hard. I know what they go through. I witnessed it. I'm much by my office months before. They come from Kasvei Tevel to make this Kinus possible. It is an extraordinary event. You should go from Chayil to Choyil. And I want to thank each and every one of you who came here, who comprise our army of women, for your life's work, for all that you do and all that you will do together with your husbands and family in pursuit of your shlichus. May Hashem fulfill all of your heart's desires for good, nachas from children, and nachas from the community. May you all have a safe trip home. God bless you. May we witness the coming of Mashiach, b'korb yamin mamish. V'sechazenu neinu b'shuv chol berachamim.